we stream it. Everything is content. That's how we work. So glad to be here. Glad to be back in H-Town. It's always funny when I'm on a plane and folks are like, oh, welcome to Houston. I'm like, really? Then my wife and I were in Vegas last night for Beyonce's next to last concert, and folks are like, oh, Cowboy Carter. I'm like, I was wearing cowboy hats before she was born. Y'all might want to slow down. So it's always funny. That's just like when people, I've been playing golf this will be my 38th year. My brother played golf as well, and folks like, oh, you stopped playing golf, Tiger Woods? No. Like, we played golf before Tiger showed up. So that's always an interesting thing when that happens. But again, it is glad to be back. I got to tell y'all a funny story. So my assistant, she handles all of my speaking stuff, and I have a rule because a couple times several years ago, a previous assistant, they said no to a speech, and then I found out later, I said, the only person who can say no was me. I said, nobody said no before me. So she gets the email about the event, and she sends me an email. She says, you're not doing this. She said, the honorarium they had, it ain't gonna work. And then she told me how much, and I was like, that ain't gonna work. And I said, who is it? Then she said it, I was like, yeah, we're gonna have to do that one. And she was like, what? She goes, what? And I said, let me explain to you. This is why I tell people I make all decisions. Let me explain to you. I said, it's a church I grew up in, whole family and everything. She's like, oh, got it. I said, see, this is why y'all don't make any decisions for me. I make my own decisions. I said, so we'll be there. So, and it was a crazy weekend. So between all the stuff this week, and there's a brother, a very good friend of mine, he has a golf tournament annually that's named after the George Grant, who of course invented the golf team, and he celebrates historic black golfers. And so I'll be out on the plane at 6 o'clock in the morning flying to his tournament, get picked up in Newark and driven to his tournament. But I said, have to be here for this occasion and for this moment, because not just in terms of for me and my family, but again, the ancestors, my grandmother and grandfather, and also my aunts and uncles who are now ancestors who came through. So all of those things are critically important when we talk about who we are, how we got here. And I often talk about that. And anyone who watches my show, listens to commentaries, I'm always invoking how I was raised, where I was raised, how I grew up, and all of those different things. And there are so many stories. A lot of people here, of course. I recall a lot of folks who've now become ancestors. I was walking around and someone said, you don't remember your catechism teacher's life? I said, I know they remember me. And my brother, because we gave teachers hell.
All right,
and I said, now understand, I was practicing then for now. So y'all gotta understand, because we used to get in trouble all the time. But you can't blame it on us though. You can blame it on my grandfather. I remember father one time, because let's just be real honest, ain't nobody Catholic taught to read the Bible. Let's just be real clear. They hand you a missalette, you recite it, you go home. Let's just be real clear. Y'all don't be faking in here. If I had to ask y'all to name how many books in the Bible, a bunch of y'all gonna fail that test. So Father, man, one day the priest, I forgot who the priest was. I don't know if he was a visiting priest, but he got into a debate with my grandfather about the Bible. And I was like, this ain't gonna end well for Father. And I was not talking about my grandfather. My grandfather knew the word back and forth. I was standing there and I was kind of like, this is gonna be a short debate. So the catechism teacher's kind of like, I don't understand, those Martin boys, they debate a lot. I'm like, look, don't blame us. That's how we were raised. So you can blame them. So when people say, man, you just go hard on TV, I was like, grew up in the family I grew up in. If you couldn't debate, you didn't eat. And they ain't treat you like a kid. They were like, oh, you come debate, but you're gonna get treated like an adult. So you had to earn your keep. So those family discussions that took 2 blocks away from how they started to see were rough every Sunday. All those people, because y'all understand, well, y'all Catholic, we believe in procreation. So my grandparents had 8 kids, 8 had 39 kids, the 39 had what, about 70 some odd kids, and the 70 had like about 140 kids. And so I was talking to Mad Hatter or Magic 102 today. I said, we were talking, he said, man, you go hard on TV. I was like, man, listen, I don't need new friends. Because there wasn't no room growing up for friends. I didn't spend the night at a non-family member's house till I got to college. Because I had too many family members. I said, so I ain't got a problem going off on television because I don't need friends. It's about 400 of us. There's no room in our family for friends. In fact, when family members bring a friend, we're like, why are you bringing another mouth to feed? Like, what you doing? But that was our life. Trust me, it was a whole different thing. And so all the things, the lessons learned, everything goes back to family, and I'm going to speak from that perspective. And I was I'm always doing research, always reading, and so when I came across the history of the church, history of this church, I was perplexed. So when I pulled it up, this is literally what it says: the history of this church. It says our history, 1949-1951. It says 1949, Father Anthony Keel, pastor of our Mother Mercy Church in Houston, decided to purchase 12 lots of land in the Fidelity area for $2,400. His concern for a Catholic church in the area was prompted by several visits from people in the Clinton Park community. Their concerns was that the growing Catholic community in Fidelity, Galena Manor, and Clinton Park could not attend Mass at our Mother Mercy due to lack of transportation, public as well as private. His prayer was that someday a place would become available close enough. So then it goes on to say, purchased the Clinton Park Theater, and it describes the communities that showed up, Pleasantville, Galena Manor, and Clinton Park, and goes on and on and on. And it says that Father Cornelius Sullivan celebrated the first Mass in the Clinton Park Theater, and then it says with the help of monetary, physical, and spiritual contributions from residents of the 6 communities, a small temporary mission building was constructed. Then it goes on and it keeps explaining and said the names seem appropriate since so many of the parishioners were seamen, longshoremen, and dock workers employed by the Port of Houston. And then I'm reading it. Then it says that there were approximately 140 families registered with 150 children enrolled in the catechism classes. And then it goes on and on and on. And it talks about receiving full status with Father Joseph Lally serving as pastor. And then it goes through and it's talking about Knights of Peter Claver, and then it's naming Father Lally and Father Sweeney, and then it says Father Fallon, and then Father Murphy. Then talks about the students, and I'm still reading this and I'm seeing this, and then it goes into the 60s and the 70s. Father Hoffman, and then goes Father Francis Hull. I was altar boy underneath him. Father McBrady, who taught me how to cuss. That was a cussing Irish priest. I know a lot of you people like, Roland, you cuss too much in your show. I'm like, y'all can blame that Catholic priest who I grew up. That Father McBrady used to cuss all the time. Reggie, you altar boy, am I not lying? I was a cussing Irish priest. I'm letting y'all know. Hey, y'all can't handle the truth. Should have booked somebody else to speak. Okay, so it goes into my Father Carol, then Father Enette is going, and so I'm reading this, Father Saporito, and I'm reading this, and it's going on and on and on, and Father O'Rourke, and it's going on and on and on, and finally Chuck Andrus, and again, I'm seeing all of these names, and I'm seeing more names, and Father Armstrong, and talks about Harvey, and Father Stephen, and it's going on and on and on, and I'm reading this, and I said something is missing. And as I'm reading this history, I'm perplexed because you cannot have the history of a church without naming the people behind the church.
All right, come on, ready?
Now, for folks who think that, well, Roland, that's your opinion, it's not, because literally, you cannot read Nehemiah where he was concerned with the wall of Jerusalem that was destroyed. And when he went back and surveyed the wall and he then laid out the vision to rebuild the wall, scripture says the people said, let us rebuild. And then as it lays out, when they started building, and there were haters and they were being attacked and they finished it, it literally names the people that built this portion of the wall, and this portion, and this portion, and this portion. So you cannot talk about a 75th anniversary of a church if you ignore the names of the people that actually made it happen. See, again, my assistant was wondering. She's like, I don't understand. She's like, I get church, but she's like, you a person in high demand. I said, yeah, but see, I need you to understand. I said, there were meetings in my grandparents' living room. I said, so this is not just a church I grew up in. I said, it was literally a church that was birthed in the same living room that I sat in. I said, and so my grandparents, aligned with other folk, going door to door in the neighborhood, knocking on doors, because you had to have a certain number of families. And so if we're going to talk about the history of the church and how you got here, you cannot do that just naming priests if you don't name the family. See, we make a mistake all the time. We talk all the time about Reverend Dr. King. We talk about others. We talk the Civil Rights Movement. But there were regular, ordinary people that did extraordinary things. See, you can have great leaders, but if you don't have any troops behind you, then you actually can't do anything. And so we're not sitting in this room because a priest said, hey, there needs to be a church. If there were no people present in neighborhoods creating the demand for the church, then there would not be an Our Lady Star of the Sea Catholic Church. We would not be sitting here on the 75th anniversary. And so what is required of us is, as moving forward, is etching the names of those folks in the history books, because it's important 25 years from now for the 100th and the 150th and the 200th anniversary that when somebody looks back and says, how did this church get here? There needs to be a list of families that were responsible for the church being here. So the history that is on the diocese website is grossly incomplete. And those blanks need to be filled in. And there are folk who are sitting in this room who are aware of that history, and the history needs to be recorded. And so whether someone sits down with a camera and begins to record that, because when we always talk about in the future, well, how did this happen? Well, if you don't have folk telling folk, no, this is what happened and this is how they did it. And they sat there and they had fish fries and they had other fundraising events. Because the structure didn't just happen. The building ain't just bought just because. You don't have members just because. It's the folk who put in the work who actually made it all possible. And so that's really what the celebration is. The celebration today is not about a building. The celebration is not about a priest saying, hey, let's do this. The real celebration is that there were a group of people who came before us who had the vision and the tenacity and the willingness to say we must create this church to serve not just the body of Christ, but to actually serve the people. See, the reason I started talking about it again, when I told my sister why I had to do it, because understand, going to this church wasn't just a thing we did every Sunday. Now, listen, that's all we did. When I say all we did, again, Our Lady Star of the Sea, located 2 blocks from my grandparents' house. We lived 8 blocks from them. My Uncle Warren lived in the same neighborhood. My Aunt Lurdy eventually moved in the same neighborhood. We gathered every single Sunday. My grandfather died when I was 15. I can't recall a single Sunday from the time I was born till he passed. And then my grandmother was still with us, but we never ever gathered every single Sunday. I wasn't joking when I said I ain't have no friends. I had school friends. I didn't have weekend friends, because our weekends were predicated on family. Grandmother had a catering business. I started when I was 7, stopped when I was 30. My brother now owns the business and carrying that going forward. My mom had a cake business, so we were all together. I'm saying all of that because also all that we did was surrounded based upon what happened at the church. Being involved, not just going to catechism, but all the other activities. Knights of Peter Claver, volunteering for bazaars, all those things. And so the reality is a church is not just a building where you gather on Sunday. It also is a place where there's activity 7 days a week that creates a culture and identity for a group of people. Neighborhoods in our society are not based upon just where we live. There are institutions in neighborhoods that define a neighborhood. So if anybody talked about Clinton Park, they would talk about the park itself, Clinton Park Elementary, across the highway, Pleasantville, but they would also name the church. That's every place. If you go to 3rd Ward, go to 4th Ward, go to 5th Ward, you go anywhere around the country, when you talk about our neighborhoods, the church is a central place, a central gathering place of activity, of advancement, but it's also a place where families unite and how things are determined. Father and I were talking about, and I had this conversation with Reverend Ralph Douglas West, who was my pastor of the Church Without Walls. And one of the things that he said is that, he said, I don't count members. He said a church is not defined by members. He said a church is defined, he said we count families. He said we count families because families are multi-generational. When a family joins a church, they're likely going to be there anywhere from 15 to 20 or 25 years. Kids may grow up in there. They get married there. They have graduation parties there. And then you have weddings there. You have funerals there. And so the church becomes this lifelong investment for families. And if all of y'all sit here think about it, you sit here like, man, he ain't lying, because we had birthday events at the church, anniversary events at the church. All of our graduation parties, high school and college, were at the church. They weren't at the community center. They weren't somewhere else. They were at the church. Which you now have to ask yourself, hold up, why were all these things at the church? Because the church became a universal central player in our lives. I guarantee you, if we go from table to table in this room, each person that came through this church has a multitude of stories where they can talk about what happened when they were at the church. A lot of y'all can talk about this. I know this for a fact. How many of y'all can, like right now, I don't leave nothing early. I don't leave a movie early. I don't leave concerts early. Traffic is going to be there. Somebody like, man, why you don't leave anything early? I said, because we never left church early. I don't understand the concept of people holding their finger up in the Baptist tradition and leaving church early. Because I know our family, we always were the last ones leaving the church. I don't think y'all understand. When I say the last ones leaving the church, Father left the church. And we were still at the church. Listen, there were so many events at the White House. They had a couple of events at the White House. Biden was there. They had a Christmas party, and then they had another event. And the White House security, Secret Service, and ushers were trying to figure out, like, why won't these black people leave? And I turned to him, I said, let me explain to some of y'all. Black people do not leave events on time. I said, black people don't just walk out at closing time. No, we linger. And the secret said, one of the sisters, she said, why you always one of the last people to leave? I said, baby, look, that's how it was at our church. Every single Sunday. Church may have been over mass at what, 10:30? And what, ended about 11:45, 12. We ain't leave till about 2:15. Matter of fact, we spend more time in the parking lot than we did at the sun. I'm just letting y'all know. I mean, that's just how it was. And so I can sit here and just think about so many different things that we went through, and it was all tied to the church. And folk look at me and they're like, I don't understand it. Like, they're like, I keep hearing this reference. I said, because everything revolved around in terms of what we did. Yeah. And so that tells you how valuable the church is, the church body, the interpersonal relationships, the folk who you know, the folk who you see, because you're seeing them every single day. So that's why when I look at the history of this church, I'm simply unsatisfied with the official record, because it's missing context, it's missing nuance. Because if you don't name the people, then what do you actually have? You have what I consider to be an incomplete history. And that's why it's so important for us to understand. And I was talking to my Aunt Pam and my mom about that because there were 8 of them, and they lost majority of their siblings, and that's why it's important when you talk to folk while they are here, because when you talk about what Clarence and Imelda Lamont did, and you got to name Mr. and Mrs. John Morris, and you got to name Mr. and Mrs. Frank Jamerson, Mr. and Mrs. Marie Perry. In fact, let's just go ahead and do this here. Let's just do this here, just real quick, because I got the mic, so whatever. Here's the deal. So I need this table. This is how we gonna do this here. I need this table to stand and name your family member who was at this church, brought you here. So at this table, give me a name. Name this table.
Curly and Elizabeth Joseph.
This table.
Roxy and Margie White.
This table.
Bertha and Charles Williams.
I know all y'all, that's my family. This table right here.
Merle.
This table.
Lauren and Katina Perry.
So the Esprits and the Ozans, y'all gotta just make it short. Everybody know the Esprits and the Ozans. Y'all adding extra names and stuff. Just get the last thing. Go ahead, the next table. Say it again. Huh? Right here. Oh, wait, hold on a second. Go ahead. All right, Briscoe. All right, we go.
Ella Walker and the Davis family.
Alfred and Bertha Will. Wallace Chapman.
Say it again. Got it?
Terrence and Amanda Gilroy.
Got it? Say it again. Of course. We done roll the shows. All right then. Go ahead.
Mary and Henderson Alexander and Wilfred and Fernella Lee.
See, you cannot be here if you don't name the people. Huh? I already said the name 3 times. Gone. Come on. The reason that is important is because if you lose touch with the folk who made it possible, then again, in the future, when folks say, well, how did this happen? Then you have nothing to say.
Come on.
You have no story to tell. When I travel this country, I've got probably 2.5, 3 million miles on our airlines. And when I travel, no matter where I go, and when I see a statue, when I see a plaque of somebody African American, I stop, take a picture, and I read it. I don't go through the Atlanta airport without stopping at the plaque of my alpha brother Maynard Jackson.
Come on, come on.
When I'm going through Intercontinental,
Yeah.
I stop at that bust of Mickey Leland.
Come on, come on.
When I'm traveling and I'm going through Austin and the statue of Barbara Jordan.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when I'm going through Union Station in Washington, D.C., the statue of A. Philip Randolph.
All right.
And then when I go to so many places, I remember I was reading Will Haygood's book on the confirmation of Thurgood Marshall, and he was talking about two African Americans the house was firebombed on Christmas in Sanford, Florida. And he was talking about the work that they did with the NAACP, and we had a special show at Bethune-Cookman, and I was driving to Orlando for an event, and I'm on the highway, and I see the sign of the museum for this family, and I stopped and pulled over, and I turned back around, and I went there, and it was closed, but I still shot some video of it. When I'm in Jackson, Mississippi, I'll be sure to go by the house where Medgar Evers was shot and killed in his driveway. The point I'm making is I do that because I don't just simply want to have a cursory understanding of the people that made it possible for us to be here today. No, I want to be able to name folk who did stuff, so when the next generation is questioning when it comes to voting, when they're wondering why we should be mobilizing and organizing, when we talk about how do we change communities, then there's something for us to say, because the reality is there is no Clinton Park, there is no Fidelity without Our Lady Star of the Sea, which means that without the people who were doing the work, who were investing the time, who were changing the neighborhood. So church wasn't just a Sunday thing, it was a 7-day-a-week thing. And so the church changed and created neighborhoods. And so when you talk about paved streets and lights and things along those lines, it was because the church became the meeting and the gathering place where people said, how do we begin to make changes in our community? And so now the question that has to be asked is, how is this church still relevant in 2025 and beyond? And I dare say we need to have the same intestinal fortitude that the founders had, where it wasn't just about the building. They didn't simply come there and worship and then go home. They understood that if you want to actually change the world, then you must be able to have a place to actually do it, because black folks are not here without the church. Whether we're talking Baptist or Kojic or AME or Catholic, is all there. And so that is also our history. And so we're sitting now in a situation where literally our community is under attack, where there's an effort to defund black America, civil rights and economic rights. And then what you have is you have a majority Catholic Supreme Court that simply does not preach the actual values of Catholicism. When you have people, as Father said, they love talking about the Catholic Church position when it comes to abortion, but they're real silent when it comes to the death penalty. So many of these evangelicals, I never see them when a black man is shot and killed who is unarmed, but they real quick to talk about, again, somebody who's going to an abortion clinic. If we are going to be the true body of Christ and the true church, then what is required is real people of faith living and practicing that faith. Because see, I say those folks are anti-abortion, they ain't pro-life. Because you can't be destroying food meant to feed hungry people around the world, all because of you say government waste, and then folk have been silent about that. When you have cuts right now to funding across the world for HIV and AIDS, and then you have so-called Christians standing up there praying in the Capitol, but they're not Praying, they are Preying against all of us. This is not a moment for Our Lady Star of the Sea to be silent. This is a moment where church should be operating like these Catholic priests are, traveling to immigration courts with undocumented workers and saying, I dare you to arrest them, with a priest standing right here. If there was ever a moment for the church to stand up in 2025, this is it. When you're dealing with a fascist, a tyrant, an insurrectionist, a liar, an absolutely uncouth, uncivilized, evil demon sitting in the Oval using, and now he wants to change it, then this church simply can't be silent. So the question for everybody here is, what are you prepared to do after this event? What are you prepared to do after church on Sunday? Are you going to simply recite words in a missalette, recite words that you know, whether you talk about the Apostles' Creed, or are you going to take the very words you recite and put it into action 7 days a week? This is a moment that requires the church to stand up. And when I say the church, I'm talking about all of the church. If you claim that you love Jesus, I need you to act like it. Because right now, the folk who in power would tell Jesus to shut up and sit down. In fact, they would try to deport him because they would say, you don't have your papers. And so when we have these celebrations, they're not solely about looking back on where we got here and how these things happen. They really are recommitment efforts to say, how did the people do the work that positioned us to be here? And how can we truly honor their work and their sacrifice? And it doesn't mean by being silent. The work that I do every single day, it's not about me. It's about my grandmother and grandfather. It's about my mother and my father. It's about what they did, because I can't be a beneficiary of what they did, and then I now sit back and make no deposits. One of the greatest problems that we have today, the generation after the folks who created all of this, we have made lots of withdrawals. We've made few deposits. We're living off of their prayers. We're living off of their work. And then we're wondering, saying, well, man, it's going to be rough for our kids. No, it won't be rough for our kids and our grandkids if we have the same attitude that the folks did before, who said, no, we're going to make this a better life for our children and our grandchildren. Leaving here, you have to make a decision. Are you going to be a bystander for what's happening in this country, or are you going to be a willing participant in fighting for the future? Stuff that I do, I can easily take my money, go sit down and chill. When I interviewed Harry Belafonte, my dear friend, he said, Roland, he said, I love the South of France. He said, I could easily go retire and live the rest of my days out in the South of France. He said, but Roland, we built this. He said, and I'm going to do all I can while there's breath in my body to force these folks to do what they said they were going to do. Dr. King said to America, make it true. He said, what you put on paper, he said, make it true. That's what our goal is. And so if we call ourselves Christians, if we call ourselves Catholics, if we call ourselves lovers of Jesus, then I need folk in this room, in this faith, who have the same attitude of Jesus, who says sometimes you got to flip some tables when folk ain't acting right. So the question that you are left with is, are you willing to stand up and fight and battle against injustice and do what's right? Or are you going to follow the path of what my fraternity brother Bertha Woodsy Tandy said, we will fight until hell freezes over, and then we will fight on the ice.
Okay, give it up one more time for Brother Roland Martin.